I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of this hour. Indirect talks between US and Iranian officials begin in Oman, led by Arakchi and Trump envoy Witkoff. Iran calls for mutual respect and a durable deal as US naval forces build up in the Gulf. State media says a senior Russian military official is hospitalized after being shot in Moscow. Lieutenant General Vladimir Alexeyev is a deputy chief at the Defense Ministry. The US military says it kills 2 people in a strike on a suspected drug vessel in the Eastern Pacific. Officials say the boat is operating on a known narco-trafficking route. Ukraine and Russia conclude a second round of US brokered talks in Abu Dhabi and agree to resume negotiations. Both sides carry out a large prisoner swap, the first in 5 months. US President Donald Trump launches a new website called TrumpRx aimed at lowering prescription drug costs in the US. The site allows consumers to buy discounted medicines directly from pharmaceutical companies. Netanyahu releases selected transcripts saying security chiefs assessed Gaza as stable and downplayed Hamas threat before October the 7th. He argues key information was not passed to him and places responsibility on IDF and Shin Bet leadership. Trump rejects Putin's offer to extend expired nuclear arms limits and calls for a new treaty. He says a modernized deal should replace what he calls a badly negotiated agreement and has previously urged China's involvement. Trump endorses Japan's Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi ahead of Sunday's snap election. The move is rare but follows his recent backing of other foreign leaders. We start this hour with some breaking news coming out of South Asia, and multiple casualties are feared after an explosion at Tarlai Imambargah in the Shahzad town area of Islamabad, the Pakistani capital. Police and rescue services have reached the site and initiated rescue operations. An emergency has been declared at PIMS Polyclinic and CDA Hospital. The main emergency orthopedic, burn centre and neurology departments at PIMS have been activated. Injured individuals are being shifted to PIMS and Polyclinic Hospital for treatment, and authorities are on the ground and the situation is still developing. We'll of course bring you all the developments coming out of that developing situation in Islamabad as soon as we get them all. We now turn to West Asia and our top story. Talks between the United States and Iran have officially begun in Oman, with tensions rising between the two countries. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Arakchi met with Omani Foreign Minister Badr bin Hamad Al Busaidi in Muscat ahead of the Oman-mediated talks. The discussions will focus on Iran's nuclear program, but US President Donald Trump's advisors, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, are pushing for a broader agenda, including ballistic missiles. Arakchi called for mutual respect and emphasized the need to honor commitments for a lasting agreement. Both sides remain far apart, and while the goal is a fair and mutually satisfactory deal, the outcome of these crucial talks remains uncertain. Joining us now is Peter Baum. He's the editor of the Weekly Blitz. He joins us live from London to discuss this situation further. Peter, thank you very much for joining us to discuss this. What are your expectations going into these talks? They have officially commenced in the Omani capital of Muscat. We, of course, see a situation where there is a huge naval build-up in the Persian Gulf, along with analysts saying that the Iranian regime is as unstable as it has ever been. What are your hopes for today?
Okay, Thomas. Fortunately for myself and for your viewers and listeners, we have a contact out in Oman, and I've just got off the phone to him. He was on vacation, scheduled to fly onto Turkey, where the original talks were supposed to occur. But when he realised that they were going to be held in Oman today, he rescheduled and managed to get an extra stay from the Omani authorities. Now, the feedback is as follows. Trump was quite prepared to walk away from these deals, from these negotiations, because the Iranians wanted to keep it to a one-point agenda, which was the discussion regarding uranium enrichment and their ability to produce nuclear weapons. The Trump administration, however, wanted to include ballistic missiles on the agenda. The way the Iranians are still supporting and funding and weaponizing some of their proxies, the Houthis, Hezbollah, and to a lesser extent now Hamas, and also the way the Iranian regime is conducting the IRGC to clamp down on the protests. The Iranians, however, wanted not only to keep it to a one level agenda, one issue agenda, but also needed to buy time, which the Trump administration saw through. So the Iranians have very little leverage on this, and the Trump administration realize that as well. And it would be rather surprising if the Iranians did not cave in to Trump's request, because the last thing they want at the moment is for the US military to engage with the Iranian forces. The Iranians, despite the bluster and rhetoric, are not in a position militarily to take on the armed might of the US military, together probably with Israeli assistance. Nor will they get the support from their proxies, because they have also been damaged in the last 2 years. So what do I expect from these talks? I expect the Iranians will go out of their way to try and extend the negotiations for another week as an effort to give themselves some breathing space. I don't think Trump will, however, fall for that. And if Trump isn't satisfied, or if his team aren't satisfied with the way the negotiations are going, I think we can expect some kind of military action within the next fortnight.
And Peter, in terms of the negotiations themselves, why has Oman been picked as the mediator here? It was shifted from Istanbul, of course. Oman, a previous destination where they took place earlier in 2025. And what do you make of the individuals coming to the table? You have, of course, got the two obvious picks from the United States, Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Those two have been central to pretty much most of the negotiations been going on under his administration, the foreign conflicts anyway. And, of course, you have Abbas Araghchi heading the Iranian delegation. The talks themselves, what's your analysis of them?
Yeah, interesting one, Thomas. The reason that the Trump administration have actually agreed to come back to the negotiating table, because if you remember, some 5 or 6 days ago, they were prepared to walk away. The reason they have come back is because of the efforts made by 9 Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Oman themselves, to come back to the negotiating table with Iran. So pressure was put on Donald Trump, and diplomatically, I think he's made a very shrewd move in saying, okay, we've got nothing to lose. We'll go back to the negotiating table to see whether the Iranians will commit themselves to what we want them to commit to. Now, the interesting thing is, why did the Iranians shift from Oman to Turkey. And if you look at all the analysis going on, there's not one political researcher or correspondent or diplomat that is actually able to nail this down and to define the reason. But there's plenty of talk of a spat between Iran and Turkey. Erdogan sees himself as being the leader of the Muslim world, the new Genghis Khan, the new Saddam Hussein, except the new Nasser from Egypt and in times gone by. And the Iranians are very wary about Turkey's desires in the region, which they feel for the first time could have a negative impact on them. So the reasons why the talks were moved, although no one has been able to clearly define this, is simply because of a spat between the Iranians, the supreme leader and his cabinet, and Erdogan and his advisors. Having said that, Turkey do have a seat at the table, and it will be interesting to see what pressure they put on the Iranians, because Turkey knows that if they're going to have any say in the rebuilding of Gaza, that will be down to Trump. So I think Turkey are playing quite a clever hand here, putting pressure on the Iranians in order to fulfill their own influence in the region. I do expect, though, that Trump will walk away from the deal if, or further negotiations, I should say, if the Iranians do not meet him at least halfway in what he expects of them.
Peter, do stay with us as we turn to some breaking news coming up next for our viewers. And we have some more updates coming from Russia. The Kremlin has confirmed the shooting of Russian official Lieutenant General Vladimir Alexeyev, adding that the Russian President Putin is now being briefed on the situation. According to Moscow's prosecutor's office, Alexeyev had been shot several times at a residential building in northwest Moscow by an unknown assailant who fled the scene. Lieutenant General Vladimir Alexeyev has been rushed to the hospital following this incident. Alexeyev is the deputy chief of the main directorate of the General Staff at the Defense Ministry. When mercenary chief Yevgeny Prigozhin staged a short-lived mutiny in June 2023, Alexeyev was one of the top officials who was sent to negotiate with him. We'll, of course, bring you all the updates coming out of that developing situation in Moscow. And in this discussion, we're joined by Major General Gigi Davidi, a professor of international relations and strategic studies, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us. This situation, of course, is developing, but also follows a flurry of previous assassinations that have taken place on Russian soil. This, of course, as far as we know yet, hasn't been confirmed as having any Ukrainian involvement. But what does this say and how about the current situation, especially as we're locked in the middle of direct trilateral talks between the United States, Russia and Ukraine? And is it likely to have any impact on them?
Well, Thomas, today we are in the era of hybrid warfare. In the hybrid warfare, you are fighting on the battlefield, you are fighting in the gray zone, and you are fighting through the proxies. So all these things go on simultaneously. And as the fighting goes on, you are also diplomatically engaging with each other. They say that while fighting, you are also talking. So such like assassinations or assassination attempt are all part of the hybrid warfare. And they are also in the gray zone warfare, because currently, if you see how the Ukrainian and the Russians are fighting, they are fighting on the battlefield on the front line. They are fighting also through the aerial warfare, striking at each other's installations, energy infrastructure. And at the same time, there are also proxies that are also playing the role that is behind, not in the front line, but in the rear areas. So what you can see now, whether it is Ukrainian have a hand or not, well, that can't be conjectured. But definitely, this type of assassinations, this type of targeting the senior military leadership or the political leadership is all part of today's warfare, and that's why we call it the age of hybrid warfare. Thomas.
Yes, Major General Davidi, do stay with us as we turn to our next story. Of course, we'll keep our viewers updated on that developing situation. We now turn on to the next, and the US Secretary of State of Arms, Thomas Diano, who has said that President Donald Trump has been clear that he wants a new treaty on nuclear arms controls. Diano has added that the recently expired New START agreement, which limits on the two world's biggest nuclear powers, the United States and Russia, was flawed and did not include China. Peter Baum joins us once again to discuss this. Of course, this is a significant development. Donald Trump, the United States president, of course, putting it forward that he wants China's involvement. How likely are we to see that happening, a new deal negotiated with Beijing added to it, even considering that Beijing's current nuclear arsenal is far smaller than the likes of Russia and the United States?
Yeah, excuse me, Thomas. This post-war treaty has long been criticised. I was recently reading a report by a right-wing think tank in the US, the Heritage Foundation, that was scathing about the what they called the New START Treaty, this post-Cold War treaty to limit nuclear weapons production between the United States and Russia. China has been developing nuclear weapons for some time now, irrespective that they may have a smaller arsenal. And of course, India, Pakistan and Israel, which has always denied having nuclear weapons, but we know is a nuclear power, should also be included in any new treaty. The last one may have been fit for purpose immediately after the Cold War era, but now certainly I think the Trump administration is right to, having seen this treaty expire, I think just this week, I think is quite right to renegotiate a new treaty whereby the checks and balances which were criticised in previous reports, as I say, not only by the Heritage Foundation, but actually by the previous Secretary of State in the US administration, in the Obama administration, I believe. So to have a new treaty, probably in the world we're living in today, Thomas, rather than extend a flawed previous treaty, is probably a good idea. I think Trump will get plaudits for this.
And it marks the first time in decades where the world hasn't seen a treaty between Moscow and Washington, ever since the Cold War, in fact. What's this going to do to the geopolitical landscape? And can both actors be trusted, especially in today's times?
Well, probably not, Thomas, and that's the nuts and bolts of it. And I doubt whether China will actually want to expose what's in their arsenal and be part of this treaty as well. So I think, although politically, diplomatically, Trump will be applauded for what he wants to achieve, it's very doubtful whether Russia, the other signatory to the old treaty, will want to come along and play ball, and probably China won't either. So it really depends what leverage the Trump administration have in negotiating a completely new treaty, rather than extending and maybe slightly improving the old one.
Yes, Peter, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a great pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much. We now move over to East Asia, and China has said that it is open to dialogue with Lithuania after the Baltic nation's Prime Minister described its 2021 decision to let Taiwan step up a de facto embassy in the capital of Vilnius as a mistake. Lithuanian Prime Minister Inga Rugagini said that she's begun taking small first steps to restore ties. China downgraded relations with Lithuania in late 2021 after the nation of 2.9 million let Taiwan open a Taiwanese representative office on its soil. Beijing views Taiwan as a Chinese province with no right to set up such offices in countries which China has formal ties. Since the breakdown, Lithuania has recalled its ambassador in China and other diplomats. In late 2024, it expelled 3 Chinese diplomats in the country's office of the charge d'affaires. Major General Gigi Davidi joins us once again to discuss this. What does it say about Vilnius's current foreign policy? Why did it open not a Taiwanese embassy per se, but a representative building, knowing that Beijing would indeed step down its ties afterwards?
Well, Thomas, Beijing treats Taiwan as its own province, and its integration is seen as a leftover agenda of the 1949 Communist Revolution. So, therefore, Chinese leadership is very sensitive to anyone who either tries to establish relations with Taiwan or has relationship with Taiwan, and they have very clearly stated one China policy, and which has 5 no's, that is the no diplomatic military relation with Taiwan, no military interaction or delegation visits. So all that is part of the China's one China policy. Now the point is, in 2021, you rightly said that the Prime Minister of Lithuania had allowed to open an office. They all call it either the cultural office or a protocol office, which Chinese actually came very heavily, and they actually downgraded the relation with Lithuania. Now with the new Prime Minister coming, and that is Inga Zugini, now she has tried to mend the relations and improve the relations, and therefore some steps have been taken. And to that, the Chinese have responded that the doors are always open for the negotiation and also the diplomatic relation per se. But the point is that Chinese are very sensitive to any kind of encouragement or any kind of signs where the people, countries have a relationship with Taiwan. But I also like to make one point, that countries do have cultural offices in their embassies, or that is the Taiwanese cultural offices. Even India, we have a cultural office through which one deals with the trade and other such related issues. But they are not known as embassies, they are purely cultural offices, but allow you to have certain interaction basically on the trade and cultural dimensions. Thomas.
Major General Davidi, do stay with us as we have some breaking news coming in, and the US delegation appears to leave talks with Iran after 90 minutes. A motorcade believed to be carrying American officials has left the site of talks between Iran and the US in Muscat, Oman. The cars left a palace on the outskirts of the Solante's capital after about an hour and a half of talks, although no immediate comment from US officials has been made so far. This, of course, doesn't indicate anything, how the talks have gone. We don't know that yet, but of course, I'm sure, as the Trump administration usually does, they'll be talking to the press pretty soon. I want to come back to you, Major General Davidi. Does this signify anything? A 90-minute talk in Muscat, Oman. Do successful talk. Does this mean that it hasn't been drawn out too long? What could this signify?
Well, the talks in Muscat are actually part of the process to bring the Iranians and the Americans together on some points that they can agree, because today, Thomas, there's a huge trust deficit, and that needs to be bridged, and this is the process how it can be bridged. But the point I want to make is that the position taken by the two sides are very divergent. As far as America is concerned, they want these talks to include not only nuclear dimensions, but also capping the Iranian missile program, and also surrendering whatever uranium they have enriched, and along with that they also coupled the human rights and human rights violations. So therefore, as Americans are looking at the complete package, but on the Iranian side, they only want to restrict the talks to only nuclear dimensions. They do not want to bring in the ballistic missile issues, because that's the only deterrence that Iranians have against the American or Israelis or other adversaries. And also, they will not like to get involved in any talks which are related to the human rights or what actually can embarrass the Iranian regime. So therefore, I think these talks could be just an icebreaker, or at least setting the process into gear. But I don't think something substantial will come out in the first round of talks, Thomas.
Yes, Major General Gigi Davidi, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. It was a pleasure to talk to you here on these issues. We now move on to our final story of the hour, and the United Nations Security Council is set to approve sanction exemptions for humanitarian aid projects in North Korea. Kim Jong-un, the supreme leader of North Korea, and US President Donald Trump held rare summits in 2018 and 19, but failed to deliver a breakthrough, leaving sanctions in place. Reports say the move is aimed at facilitating essential assistance without undermining existing sanctions. The exemptions would allow aid groups to deliver food, medicine, and other basic supplies. North Korea remains under strict UN sanctions over its nuclear and missile programs. Major General Gigi Davidi joins us once again. Of course, a significant step. What are your thoughts on this situation coming out of the UNSC today?
Well, the point is, Thomas, that as far as North Korea is concerned, they have been under sanctions, and there was a committee instituted in 2006, that is the Committee 1718, which oversees the sanctions on North Korea. The current decision is to ease out sanctions on North Korea. There are two important issues that are in background. First and foremost, President Trump want to have dialogue or interaction or meeting with the North Korean supreme leader, that is Kim Jong-un. In fact, in his first term, he met Kim Jong-un 3 times, once in Singapore, then in Vietnam, in Hanoi, and third time on the DMZ itself. So that is one reason. And second, President Trump is likely to visit China sometime in the near future. So to that extent also, because North Korea is a very important ally of China, so they would like to show certain amount of easing of the diplomatic tension that prevails currently on the Korean Peninsula. So then that, if you view from that angle, that possibly this decision is in the background of these two issues that are mentioned, and the sanction may be eased out for some time. But the point is, this is only ongoing process. So sanctions are imposed, they are eased out depending upon the political scenario that prevails on the Korean Peninsula. Thomas.
Yes, Major General Gigi Davidi, thank you very much for joining us here on the broadcast. Pleasure to talk to you as always. But that is all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates. Thank you.